to take it up and should start the session.
Yep, thanks everyone. And as Vivek mentioned, I hope that you are safe at home and soon, campus opens up and you guys come back to the regular, joy of studying together. Let me start with, what I'm planning today very quickly. So I'm going to talk about very quickly, what is Flipkart, which space we are in, and don't worry about. I will not take too much time in that. Then I will talk to you about how it works before we come to the COVID challenges, right? So, click to knock is one simple, explanation or elicitation of how ideally Flipkart works, right? And what are the things which works behind the scene. And then when we come to COVID challenges, we will talk in that context, right? What broke, what scaled, what didn't scale, and challenges and so on. Right. So let me first start with standard Flipkart introduction for you guys. I hope that you can see, and if you can't, then you let me know.
India, a land of opportunities, is the most diverse country in the world, home to a fifth of humanity. So, what does it take to be a brand synonymous with online shopping in India? At Flipkart, we believe it's the ability to solve India's unique challenges with tailored innovations.
We can't see you.
2007, the homegrown e-retailer has created India's e-commerce market with innovations that have redefined how the country shops.
बेबी 10 जगह क्यों जाना? फ्लिपकार्ट है ना? ब्रांड्स, प्राइस, सर्विस, एक्सचेंज, वारंटी, सब चीज एकदम परफेक्ट. The Flipkart Big Billion Days are back.
Only on Flipkart. Exclusive.
We are not able to see the screen share.
So screen share.
The Flipkart Group is an ecosystem.
Sorry?
I think it's
Screen
not
share.
reflecting on the screen. Maybe if you can just restart the screen share.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, it's reflecting now. Yeah, we can start from.
Land of opportunities is the most diverse country in the world, home to a fifth of humanity. So, what does it take to be a brand synonymous with online shopping in India? At Flipkart, we believe it's the ability to solve India's unique challenges with tailored innovations. Started in 2007, the homegrown e-retailer has created India's e-commerce market with innovations that have redefined how the country shops.
बेबी 10 जगह क्यों जाना? फ्लिपकार्ट है ना? ब्रांड्स, प्राइस, सर्विस, एक्सचेंज, वारंटी, सब चीज एकदम परफेक्ट. The Flipkart Big Billion Days are back.
Only on Flipkart. Exclusive.
Today, the Flipkart Group is an ecosystem, having the widest digital commerce reach in India, operating at the highest scale.
Flipkart has been really supportive from the start. It feels really good because we never expected to be one of the top sellers. It is great working with Flipkart.
With unparalleled fulfillment capabilities. And powered by world-class technology. An organization driven by values. A workplace employees love. Today, the Flipkart Group consists of India's premier online fashion retailer. The country's first UPI-enabled payment app. An e-commerce cross-border trade platform. And unmatched after-sales support and service. Today, Flipkart touches millions of people every day through e-commerce, supply chain, and fintech. Today, we're building a tomorrow in which 1 billion Indians can fulfill their wishes. E-commerce, Flipkart.
Yep, so we'll start from e-commerce, Flipkart, and touches billion lives. Right? Can you hear me and see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So let me go through very quickly what was explained and what happens in the buying journey, and then I will come to the COVID part, right? So this is what you see that someone either calls you, knocks your door, and delivers the stuff to you, right? But many more thing happens behind the scene, right? And this is like a very conceptual map. So I don't want to go into the technical details, but assume this is a simple graphical representation where there are sources, right? From source, it goes to a storage. From storage, it goes to something called MH, where a lot of sorting happens, right? Based on the pin code and the destination, right? And from there, it kind of goes to the local delivery hub, which is nothing but a consolidation center. And then from there the routing happens, and from that routing the product reaches to the consumer. And then the cash also flows. Some consumers, they will pay while they are buying, which we call prepaid. Some consumers will pay at the doorstep, which is basically cash on delivery, right? So millions of orders in a day, right, all over the country, multiple cities and pin codes, so many facilities, right? And the key idea is that how can we reach on time, right? You can imagine the scale, just start imagining the scale. That's the idea of the story number one, right? Now let's take a simple things. What happens, right? So when you are on the website, you are trying to motivate the customer, trying to help him, nudge him that okay, this is the right way to search, this is the product you are searching for, right? You're trying to understand based on his browsing behavior who that customer is, what does he want to buy, right? Which date he would like to receive the shipment, and so on. So you're trying to understand the customer from multiple angles and trying to help him in shopping experience. So that is like, and then multiple decisions all across. Right, let's take a very simple example. So I've taken just before this presentation's snapshot. So I think, do you recognize this pin code 60036? I think this is IIT Madras pin code. That's what I figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone has to buy something, right, say mask in this case, right, multiple information have been retrieved in real time or near real time, right? The put earlier or the edges, right? And based on that, it will suggest some date, right? And whether the shipping is free or not free, and so on, right? So that is what happens behind the scene at scale, right? So I'm not going too much, but the idea is that, how do you convert the customer so that he can buy? You match the pin code, and from where the inventory will come, the capacity, the payment type, the address. So many complex information is being processed almost real time before we show you that information, right? uh, um, and at the same time, you will have a lot of variability, right? Some consumers on the same pin code will be buying different stuff, so there will be a different product mix. Different seller will come into the picture, because if you are buying mask, maybe the seller is someone else. If you are buying say trimmer, the seller will be something else. There will be supply in between, and supply variability we'll talk about, or rather shock we will talk about in few minutes. Right, end of the day, what does it mean? Pan India network, gigantic graph, and let me explain the attribute of those graphs. Right, the dimensions. So so you have a space and time standard, right? So let's create the imagination that you have like standard graph, and every node represents a time dot and what is happening in that space, uh, right? Then you have product attribute, right? And then you have other attributes like pricing attributes and so on. So very, very complex graph which is being traversed, right, between two node. Okay, if you can see my pointer, if you are in that blue dot and wanting to buy that mask, this is say IIT Madras, maybe it is coming from somewhere in Chennai warehouse, or maybe in Bangalore warehouse, which is say another blue dot, right? And then there is a time graph and all that. So gigantic multi-commodity time and space graph kind of architecture, right? Conceptual architecture which is working behind the scene for you, right? Once we solve for that, right, and it reaches the last mile, again you try to solve for which location you are in. If I have to reach, what is the right route to build, and so on, right? So a lot of routing and optimization will be done, right, to reach you on time. Right, now coming back to the same point, because that is where we will start, right? The disruption in this like gigantic graph, right, in multiple angles, right? Because this is the conceptual structure which scales all across the country, right? You can imagine someone is buying masks, someone is buying mobile phone, someone is buying TV, right? Very different attributes of the product. The product is being purchased in different pin codes, different addresses, different location. They are coming from different location. They are traversing through very different route. Say for example, if someone is going, some item is going from Bangalore to Delhi, it is going via maybe Bangalore, AP, Maharashtra, MP, Rajasthan, and then Delhi. And if something is traveling from say Mumbai to Calcutta, it is traveling Maharashtra, MP, like little bit of maybe Orissa, and then Calcutta, and so on. So all sorts of permutation, combination graph, and then in those graph, in edges as well as node, you have a capacities, right? So transportation capacities on edges, to simplify it. On the node, you have the source, the fulfillment capacity, or the sort kind of capacity. So that's a summary. Imagine at this point in time, it is a gigantic graph. You route, finally you try to deliver it at your home. How does we solve this problem in our regular time, right? You have a large scale this graph understanding and optimization. We call it as a E2E real time promise, and the planner, right, which continuously populates the data as and when you browse the product, right? And once the order is taken, again we try to do a batch optimization of all this, and then there are multiple optimizations which happens, or and the technology is being used to sort. You would have heard about the collaborative robotics which we install, where robots basically sort the product based on the pin code, right? You would have heard about the pods which we use, or the locker which we use to deliver, right? Even you see the person who is delivering the stuff. Mobile is the source. Everything is there in that mobile. There is a mobile app which will tell him which route to go, which customer to deliver, what kind of delivery it is, and you not only have to deliver, pick up something else, you have to take this much of cash, so much of intelligence around that, right? The critical point here is that number one, every object, every entity in the whole supply chain is connected through the technology, right? And every event is being captured, right? That is point number two. Point number three, then there are local optimizations which are happening, and then there are global optimizations which are happening, both in real time as well as in batch. Right? So that is how finally that shipment reach you. Now I come back to what happened during the COVID situation and what all Flipkart did. So I have divided that into six big problem statements. And again, quick check. Can you see the slides?
Yeah, so it's visible.
Thanks. So I will talk about six different events, and we will take that concept of large scale mammoth graph all the time, right, to make it simple. Right, the first scenario about that, during the lockdown declaration, everything is stopped, right? So what happened there, and what are the challenges? Then there is a partial revival. You can sell only essential, right? Then there is a red, blue, red, green, and orange zone, right? How do you target consumer and tailor the supply chain? What are the challenges? Then how do you scale the operations inside those fulfillment centers and so on, right? How do you scale up the manpower where the manpower is probably moving away from the core of the work to their natives, right? And how did we encourage the culture of innovation throughout this COVID period, right? So these are the six different themes which I will briefly touch upon. Right. So step number one, sudden stoppage of the network, right? What would have happened? Step number one, let's think from the customer perspective. So some customer would have ordered something and waiting for the delivery to happen. Some customers would have triggered the return and then waiting return to happen, right? Uh, some customers were thinking to buy something and things were on their wish list, right? Now what happens? Right, so the first thing is all about arresting the customer anxiety, right? Look, we are going to deliver your product, or we are going to refund you the money, or we will, once the lockdown opens up, whatever return is there, we will push out the policy maybe and then take it back, the product, right? How do you do that at a scale? Very quickly we launched the chatbot, right, for all these kind of queries which it can take and converse with the consumer, and so on, right? The second thing, right, imagine that the trucks were going from, say, Bangalore to Delhi, and when the lockdown was announced, they were somewhere near Maharashtra, and truck just stopped literally, right? People were coming in the late night shift of a day before lockdown, and they did some work, and then there was some other work which was supposed to happen on, after that. So the process is in like intermediate state, right? So if you look at that, imagine that graph, this complex graph, which was quite dynamic, right? Things are moving, decisions being made, right? And if you make this complex graph as a like very simple representation, take 2 3 nodes, and then the flow is happening, right? All of a sudden you stop the flow. What will be the problem, right? The problem number one is that, first of all, do you have visibility where they are, right? Because now your stakes, what are the shipments inside those trucks, right? What will that guy do? Where will he park, right? When can he move, right? How do you prevent the theft, and so on, right? Inside the facility, some products are already sorted and ready for the dispatch. Some products are just yet to be processed for customers consumption, right? So, and this happened pan India, right? I just gave you the example that truck is stuck in Maharashtra. Trucks are stuck all over the India. Shipments are stuck all over India, as well as I mean on the road, as well as in airports and so on. right? So immediately getting that information and almost getting that information in certain intervals becomes very, very critical, including the truck driver and so on. Right, so that is step number 2. Step number 3, right, once the uh, things, especially the essentials, were allowed, how do you do the replanning, right, which I will cover in the next part. So now government comes back and says that okay, you can sell only essentials, right? Now if you look at, imagine that you have some concept called product tree, right? Which means, say for example, detergent is one high level node. Within detergent, sorry, within detergent you have brands like Ariel, Surf, and so on. Within that you have different products and then different size. Now you have to select in that whole hierarchy which one is essential and which one is not immediately, right? So step number 1, you do that. Then based on that, uh, flagging that which one is essential or not, you blow it up across your network node, that where are these essentials, right? Some of them will be in facilities, some of them are not yet started, some of them will be inside the truck, some of them will be very close to the customer. So step number 2, now you have figured out, search in the gigantic graph what is the state of these essentials. Now you have to do the replanning. What do you do in that replanning? Okay, take out only these essentials and move them forward while keeping others as it is, right? Because even the backward movement is not possible. When the essentials got open, uh, what was not open is that you can take the other product back, right? Because the borders were sealed and so on, right? Now you have a very complex reconfiguration of this whole connectivity. What do I mean by that? Now first of all, say things were moving into a set of shipments were moving in a box, right? Big box. You have to open it up and take out 2 of them which were essentials, and keep the other stuff back. So step number 1, sorting becomes quite complex, right? And you have to do it probably in many of these nodes. Step number 2, now you have to figure out the new route, because the route is not like, as I mentioned, Bangalore, Nagpur, Delhi. Maybe it is now Bangalore, Bhopal, Delhi, something like that, right? Because uh, the the opening of the routes are very different, right? So now you have to sort again. First you have to figure out those essentials. Step number 2, take out those essentials. Step number 3, based on the new route, you reconfigure this stuff and start flowing towards the consumer. Third, when you reach close to the consumer, you have to ensure that you are contactless in terms of what you are during your delivery to the consumer, which means no cash exchange, which means you have to do something on top of this box so that you don't touch, I mean, the same person, sorry, 2 different persons are not touching the same surface, if you can minimize that, right? And I will cover that little later. But technically, the finances or the cash is contactless immediately, which is digitized. The second one is, assume that on top of this packet you put a wrapper, right? And then that delivery boy opens up that wrapper and asks customer to take out the box, right? So delivery boy is only touching the wrapper while the customer is picking up the box, for example, or he's keeping that box outside, right? So all this is being done from the movement of essential, and I will cover some of these details of some of these things in the next few minutes. Coming back to the next part, which is basically targeting. So the next step which happened is that okay, government said, yeah, we will partially open, we will open fully in the green zone, we will have a containment and red zone where only essentials will be there, and then there is orange zone where essential and some other product can be there. What does it mean? Now again you have to reconfigure dynamically that network, right? That, oh, in that product tree we mark certain items as essential, they are mapped only to the red zone, for example, right? All other items can go to green zone, and even the essentials can go to the green zone, right? uh, Now again, two problems. Problem number one, for the new orders there are no problem because things can be started again, but again the shipments were stuck in the chain, right? Again you have to resort and start the whole thing, reflowing again in the network, based on the replanning. So the first part is, again, map everything from the lat long perspective about what is red zone, what is green zone, what is orange zone, right? Understand that pan India map and give this to this gigantic graph that okay, now your state is red, blue, green, and now based on that state, this is what can happen to you, right? The third is, once that state is changed, dynamically you restructure the network and plan it again, right? Third is, again, you do the consumer communication about, okay, now we are delivering this to you, or we are not able to deliver this to you because you are in red zone, right? So this is basically how you started targeting customer that look, you are in green zone, you can buy everything. You are in red zone, sorry, we can deliver only after lockdown, and so on. Sorry. Uh, then there was a question about, okay, how will you start the operation against our gigantic facilities, right? So Flipkart is very, very committed and cautious about employee health and safety, right? That's our like number one goal, right? So of course, operationally, all the rules have been created based on the government guideline and WHO guideline. All the hygiene standards have been maintained, which means cleaning up the facilities, continuous disinfection of the facilities and the product inside that, checking of the employee temperature, giving them PPE inside that, ensuring that social distancing is maintained inside the facility, right? Technology wise, we have done a lot of innovations, right, to ensure that even the temperature taking can happen through the social distancing. So people came up with automated way of dispensing the mask, automated way of taking the temperature, right, and so on. Even in the process control, a lot of optimization algorithms have been reconfigured so that the density can be minimized. What do I mean by that? If you look at simply in a warehouse, you imagine that there is a big rack, and in that rack you have multiple mobile phones, or any product, right? Now there are two orders from, say, your pin code 60036, and another order is from say Bangalore, 5600103, right? Now both of them, they point to the same bin of the rack, because mobile phone is of the same type and they are there. We have to ensure that these two people are not going together to pick, right? One for Bangalore and one for, say, Chennai. And this is an example, by the way. Right? They go in some sequence so that the social distancing is being maintained. Right? So this is how technologically you ensure that you scale the system with all the rules which have come because of COVID, situations. Right, scale up of manpower. So as I told you that it so happened that people were going back again. We ensured that we take care of the employees with protection and giving services to them, which means that we applied our buses to bring them to our facilities. Buses followed those norms of only 33% occupancy and so on. I mean, the proper distance is being maintained. Step number two. Step number three, lot of training during how to work during these kind of things. And in Flipkart, most of the trainings are being done using video, and I will not say exactly Coursera kind of format, but very similar kind of simulated training modules, right? And we also scaled up our partnership. We figured out that companies like Ola and Meru, their drivers are not able to deliver the stuff, but and they are free. right? Can we tie up with them and can they start delivering this stuff? So we tied up with Ola, say for example, sorry, Uber. I'm really sorry. We tied up with Uber and Meru for our delivery, and then there are different other channels whom we partner with. Right. So this is how we scaled up manpower. Let me talk about three things about the innovation, right? The culture, right? So I think there are three big themes for Flipkart culture: ABC. A is basically, you take audacious goal, right? B is basically, it's not about the audacity of the goal, but deliver it, right? Bias for action is very, very critical. So second is the bias for action, and C is that always work for customers problem, right? So ABC is our value, right? And that came very handy, right, during this thing, because that by design inculcates entrepreneurship, right? Take ownership, right? Deliver quickly and solve for customer, right? People were highly empowered, so it was a lot of we see a lot of bottom up innovations, right? So whatever I talked about, reconfiguring the graph, right, contactless delivery, right, different kind of new delivery models and so on, all of them were like, or most of them were like bottom up innovations, right? Of course, the third big element of the innovation is that you should have a right tool, right? Can someone deliver it quickly and then launch it, right? If those kind of tooling, those kind of infrastructure is not there, taking innovation to the market will be very, very difficult, right? So that's where I will stop from my keynote perspective. I understand it was a monologue, but in summary, let me summarize three, four critical points. Right? If you look at the graph which I explained to you, that is really a physical graph also. Step number one, through technology we make it virtual. Step number three, that virtual is very, very real time when the customer browses, or in his shopping experience, it influences the shopping. Step number four, when the disruption came, the whole structure of that graph was broken, both physically as well as in the systems perspective. Step number six, we did a lot of innovation, to ensure that some form and shape of those graph based on the regulations are up and running, right, and we are able to serve maximum amount of consumer. Six, I think the core culture of Flipkart, which is taking big goals, delivering it, and solving for customer, really, really came handy for people to quickly act on it. So that is where I will stop, and I'm open for questions.
Okay, thank you, sir, for your great insights and knowledge. And I might see the talk was informative. Now we'll be moving towards our Q&A session to answer the questions of registered participants. And I also request the live audience, if they wanted their answers to be questions to be answered in the session, please post it in the chat box. So now we would be starting our questionnaire session. So the first question is, how is Flipkart planning to automate its delivery system? How are you improving the production and supply chain process in a real?
Correct, correct. So I think a lot of examples I gave in my talk, right? How technology drives the fulfillment center, or the sort, or the whole network optimization and the delivery part. So we are very, very tech mindset company, right? Whatever we launch first, we launch through the technology. So that is what we invest in. We have invested in robotics. We are very, very actively investing in robotics, and of course, it is not like just bring the robot and implement it. We are highly Indianizing it, right? Because we understand the part of the labor is cheap here. The job is very, very important here. So we have come up with the concept of cobots. How can robot and humans work together, right? uh, and lot of innovations around the algorithms for robots and the design for robot happens inside Flipkart. So very actively using AI, ML, robotics, and some of these new concepts. Right, we are trying to automate our fulfillment and delivery systems.
Okay, great. So you are moving towards technology more, and this should be necessary for automating the situations in such conditions. So
Yes.
moving towards the next question. So the audience might be very excited to know that how this pandemic really affected Flipkart as a whole. Like how your tier one, tier two, tier three cities are affected, and how you are planning to make the essentials delivery in the tier three cities during this lockdown.
Correct. So as I was giving you the example, right? In the whole flow, uh, all the essential items, including groceries and so on, we came up with a lot of different models to deliver to tier one, tier two, or tier three cities. We have partnered with multiple, sellers and kirana chains across India, right? Especially for grocery, so that we can very quickly deliver those stuff to the consumers. As I told you, we quickly enabled the the contactless delivery, so that the touch can be minimized between customer and us. So essentially, three big problems which we have solved: availability of the products, right, by a lot of partnership across brands, sellers, and onboarding kirana chains, right. The second one is basically ensuring that manpower supply and the automation are up and running as per the rules, right, so that we can go and deliver. Third is ensuring customer safety, which is the contactless delivery, right. So these are the three big levers which we have ensured, so that we can reach to each and every part of the country.
Okay, great. So this might have moved you towards connecting with our MSMEs of India.
Correct, many of them, yes.
Yeah, because earlier, like you were not being connected with them. The Flipkart's main motto was not delivering the grocery items. It was more towards electronics, televisions, and all. So,
Correct, correct. I think it is not true that we don't work with MSC. We have so many sellers on our platforms. I mean, thousands of sellers on our platform. Flipkart is a marketplace.
okay, sir. So
Yeah.
let's coming forward to our next question. Why Indian companies are not able to play in the Indian market while foreign players are able to do so easily? Still, we have a best example of Flipkart.
So I didn't get that question in the sense like foreign players are playing far better in India compared to the Indian companies. I'm not sure about that. I think a lot of Indian companies are doing whatever they can do, and they are doing far better because they know the context very well. It's not only Flipkart. There are so many other companies like food delivery companies, right? Just the local logistic companies, right? They are doing very well in during this COVID time and able to serve customers. Companies like delivering milk in the morning, they have also ramped up to deliver essential goods at home in the morning. So I disagree with that statement.
Okay, sir, this was great point of view.
Yeah.
As per you, how will the things change in the corporate sector post this crisis?
I think a couple of things. See, consumption will be function of how the economy grows, right? And I think economy will take its own time to come back to the normal level, right? And which will impact both the corporate sector as well as the way say consumer will buy their consumer consumption behavior. Probably they will buy more of essentials, right. Discretionary spending will might be little less for some period of time, and they will be looking for a lot more value from any of the players. And I think as a Flipkart, we are well positioned. So if you look at the flip, if you remember the starting video of Flipkart, we focus a lot on affordability, right? Giving the high quality product at the right pricing. So some of those points will really help Flipkart. So that is part number one from business perspective. Part number two, I think, uh, as I told you, Flipkart is a very employee centric company. So from the second part is like, how will people work for next few months, and so on. We are very actively following the guidelines of the government, and maybe sometimes we are a little bit more conservative in terms of employee safety and security and health. Massive infrastructure has been deployed for working from home, making people productive, right? How can people code at scale and deploy at scale from home? Who can do what and so on? So all those have been, innovated and figured out during this period of time.
Okay, nice to hear that, sir. Let's move towards our next question. Like you said that there are things like essentials and non-essentials are blocked at a place. Like you can only move essentials right now, and the non-essentials has to be there. So, like, what are you planning to have that segregation sorting properly? And is there any suggestions? Is there any suggestions like you are moving towards more warehouses or increasing your production or being limited to it?
Correct. I think Flipkart, so step number one, as I mentioned, I think now we have much more complicated scenario that essentials are only for red zone, while green zone we can supply many more things and so on. So as I told you that we have classified the product, step number one. Step number two, when we do the sorting, we map, right? That okay, if this is the address, which means this is the pin code, and this is the state of the pin code, which is green yellow zone, and this is the product, and the attribute of the product is essential or non-essential, which means can it go or not, right? So throughout our supply chain, whether it is picking, whether in the fulfillment center or picking from the seller or in sorting, we keep checking this stuff, and thus we are able to flow through accurately as per the government norm. So that is part number one. Part number two, are we scaling up our capacities? Of course. I mean, we believe that this situation is like, short term and so on. So economy will open up and we will scale it up. And even to serve during this point in time, during the time of lockdown and so on, we have scaled up our capacity significantly so that we can serve maximum amount of consumers.
Okay, cool, sir. I'm sure the audience feels fortunate listening to you. Let's move to next. As people during the due to this situation, people have got comfortable shopping from grocery stores or much more, and being extra protective for personal hygiene. How do you think pandemic is going to impact customer perception regarding buying from online platforms, and which are the products that's going to be impacted more after pandemic is over?
Sure. So I will split this question into two, three part. Part number one is change in consumer behavior. Part number two, the buying channel, right? And part number three is that, what is Flipkart doing around this, right? Distancing, the hygiene of the process of the product, and so on, right? And they will be buying more of the essential stuff rather than the discretionary, as I told you, for a short period of time at least. Right. So that is part number one. That is the consumer behavior part. The second one is the channel. I think online to me, and now I'm not talking only about Flipkart, in general online, if you look at China and any other country, I think online scaled up much more because from both social distancing perspective, and as I told you about the contactless delivery, it is far more safer, right? As I told you, inside even our whole fulfillment center and sort center and so on, things are taken care in terms of hygiene, in terms of touch, in terms of cleaning the facilities, cleaning the box, and so on. So they are much more coming from the hygienic condition, if I may say so. And when it is being delivered to the customer, right, we ensure that the contact is not maintained. So in my viewpoint, I think the e-commerce as a channel in general, or the contactless way of buying the stuff, will increase and should increase, and that has been the pattern throughout. And third point is around Flipkart. I think we are committed to serve our customers and ensuring that they are always protected, and we are solving for those kind of problems, which means ensuring that availability of product is there, ensuring that the contactless delivery works, right? We minimize the contact with consumer, ensuring that hygiene is maintained throughout the chain.
Cool, sir. Your initiatives are great, and you are much. This would help your customers to not go to offline sectors and constrain with you. So
Thank you.
next question, like what, as per you, what seems to be the future of our Indian e-commerce industry? Like what are the biggest challenges that we'll face later on?
I think the if you look at the macro level, the e-commerce or the retail e-commerce is still like 3 to 4% of the overall retail commerce, right? So in that way, the growth potential is much more. If you look at China and all that, their e-commerce is 30% plus of the overall retail.
Yeah, we
Uh,
just have 3 to 4%.
yeah, correct, correct. So I think the potential wise, there is a huge potential for e-commerce to grow in India. What we need to solve for, right, but which is the difference between India and China, is that the earning of middle class in India is very different than earning of middle class in China. I mean, China is relatively richer than middle class is richer than what we have in India, which means consumers are looking for a very high quality product at a very affordable price. Thus value disruption is very critical. So that is the challenge number one, that how can you reach out to the customer with the right value, step number one. And that requires innovation across your supply chain, across even in the product design, by the way. And that is the second part. Then the second challenge is basically, unlike other countries where there are regions where the commerce happen, there are regions where the commerce doesn't happen. India commerce happens everywhere, right? Inside the small town in Bihar, inside the small town in Gujarat, to the Jammu and Kashmir to Kanyakumari, right? So across the country, tier one, tier two, tier three cities, villages, everywhere, right? How do you reach there is another big problem which needs to be solved for, right? So tier two, tier three cities, their buying behaviors are very different, their needs are very different, and India is unique in one way in terms of retail commerce, that unlike China or US, where there were organized retail chains like Walmart in US, and there are different chains in China. India never had that at scale, right? So just the pure selection, availability of selection itself is a big problem for say tier two and tier three city, right? So in that way, the potential is huge. If someone can solve the right product, the right value, and the reach problem, I think there is a huge potential for the growth.
Great, sir. Your question answered was really great. I'm sure this brought new insights to us. So coming forward to the new article, like how are you gearing up to face your new competitor, the GeoMart, which is scheduled to hit the market?
So I think in Flipkart, as I told you, right, the culture ABC, right, it's all about thinking about solving for the consumer, right? So we are at this point in time more focused about what value we can deliver to our consumer, rather than focusing too much about what competition is going to do. So that is statement number one. State number two, I think, as I told you, there might be a space for maybe more players and so on. So we are not worried about different players and so on.
Okay, your perception was really great. So, like, uh, as per you, like how can we college students can come and solve some issues, and what is the role which we should play in this crisis?
I think couple of things which you guys should do. So number one, right, the philosophy, right? The philosophy is that this is the time some people will be destroyed, people slash companies slash organizations, right? Some will be able to maintain the status quo. Of course, there is a struggle to maintain the status quo, and someone will come out winner. Right now, let's look at who will come out as a winner. The people slash organizations who are very good at handling unknown, right? Because this is what that situation is, right? People who could create a lot of scenarios, vision the future, able to shape the future, and who are the builders, right? Who can quickly build an experiment, right, and scale. So, so three things: people who are ready to face a lot of unknown, people who can build the solution in the area they have identified, and who could scale. Right, and I believe that as a student, you have a lot of opportunities to work on these three dimensions. And I can give you so many examples, right? In the country, we are having, so many issues. How do you start the manufacturing, right? Uh, uh, there are a lot of opportunities that maybe internationally some companies would like to come and set up the manufacturing or the operations in India, right? Uh, One of the critical issue India had was we were expensive, our labor force is not skilled, right? The power supply itself is not very regular and expensive, right? Just very known examples. How can you guys solve some of these big problems or part of it? Right. So I think students can play a tremendous role in innovating for India.
Okay, sir, great. Lastly, the last question which I come put forward to you is like any advice which you want to give our young entrepreneurs for how to plan their work and achieve their goal, as they really got a shock after this.
Okay, so I think first is that time heals. So believe in future, right? Don't give up. So that is part number one. Part number two, as I told you, right? Be builder. Not just the thinker and the creator. Build the stuff, right? And third is basically think about a skill. Once you have built, how can I solve problems for millions of people? And you're fortunate that you are in a country where millions of customers, millions of people's problem is not a big challenge, right? We have billions of people in this country. So be builder, uh, think about scale and be positive. I think these are the three very simple stuff. And learn a lot. I mean, I think you are in an era where a lot of new things are happening in terms of in the technology space. Learn and bring a lot of stuff from technology space. I think we can do a lot more.
Okay, sir, your these positive words might have given a confidence to our budding entrepreneurs. So now we should end this session. Thank you, sir, for taking time out of your busy schedule, and was a pleasure to host you as a speaker. I'm sure the audience is grateful for your insights and it had helped them a lot. A great thanks to our audience for attending the session, and you stay tuned for our upcoming activities. Guys, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.